Hello, everybody. Welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn, and I'm here with Ben Marriott. Hello, Ben.
Good morning, Flynn. How are you? It's great to join Adobe Live on a beautiful Wednesday morning in Australia. I haven't streamed on a Wednesday before, so this is good. It's a different vibe. There's good action in the chat. How are you,
Yeah,
Flynn?
yeah, I'm great. Yeah, I'm loving the chat. Hey, everyone. Hotch is in the house. I actually did a podcast with Andrew Hotchradell when he was in Sydney just before the lockdown, and we released that last week, I think. Self plug, sorry, that's rude. Um, hey, Eric in the chat as well. Adobe Live OG in the house. That is so great to see you. Kathleen, if you're still there, that was an amazing stream. That sketch party. We love it over here. We're thinking about taking some cues from your amazing work and doing something similar. Angie's, and yeah, everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here on Adobe Live. If you're wondering what we're talking about with chat, you might be watching this somewhere else that we're streaming out to. You can come along to behance.net/live and you can join the fun. We're having a great morning. Miguel's in the house as well. Festus is here. Oh my gosh, we are going to have a wonderful morning today. Lots of friendly faces and names in the chat. But I thought I might quickly bring up our updated schedule, if I can find it over here. Here we go. So here we are for the remainder of this week. We are here with Ben Marriott. We're going to be tackling some Instagram story templates, animation style, After Effects style. This is going to be really fun today. And then tomorrow we have Bianca Beers, who is doing amazing illustrator from Sydney, I should say first. And she'll be tackling the Honor Heroes campaign that is going on right now. That's going to be lots of fun. We have Demis Rusley coming back for some more creative photography editing, some really exciting stuff happening there. And then if you haven't seen Jeff Chen and his speed painting on Adobe Live before, it is amazing. That's Saturday for us, over here. So it's a nice early morning for Jeff and myself. Wow, Ben, you thought 8:30 was early, but 8 o'clock on a Saturday. I haven't made you do that yet, so maybe
No,
one
I didn't
day.
know there wasn't. I didn't know there wasn't 8 o'clock in the morning on
Right.
a Saturday.
Yeah, me either until we started streaming this early. But yeah, so it's wonderful to have you here. We've been having a chat about some of the really useful, tangible things that we could give sort of back. Well, you could give back because you're actually going to do all the work to to some of the community, and some things that happen comes up quite a lot is like making like really engaging animated stories for something like Instagram, or like really engaging things online, because your stories are fantastic. And we thought that maybe we could teach people a little bit how to do it themselves, and also potentially give them something to take away today.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Like Instagram stories are something that has just become like unexpectedly more a part of how people and companies like market themselves these days. Like
Mm,
like I know my stories get like sometimes almost more than the posts that I put on my feed,
mm.
and they're it's a lot more engagement and fun, and there's like a looseness that you can approach them with, but there can be a lot of pressure if you want to make something I suppose look good and sleek and professional,
Mm.
or or consistent amongst your all your other content in your feed everywhere. So like I know I use this Instagram story template for whenever I do a tutorial. I have like a system that says what the tutorial's about, and like
Mm.
swipe up to go here and things like that. And if I had to make that every single time, like every week when I release a new video, it would not get done. So I made a template for myself that I use, that I customize for my needs. So I thought today we're going to build a cool, engaging Instagrammy story template, and then show you how to like lots of really cool After Effects tricks to make things easier on you for editing. So
Mm.
when you go to edit, you don't need to you're not confronted with all these layers and thinking, all right, well, I can't remember what exactly did what. Let me turn this one on and off again to see if that one is the one I need to edit.
Yeah.
We'll have a nice controller and a nice setup, so you just have to click the minimal amount of things to get it looking good, and hopefully try to make it as customizable as possible. And hopefully, yeah, we might be able to get some input from the chat later on about maybe some features or things they would like to include in their stories that maybe we didn't cover that they'd like to learn how to do.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I think this is going to be a lot of fun, everybody. So I've actually got us. We might just fade in. We might just get started. So just before I hand over to you completely, there is a timer in the top right hand corner. There's a lot of familiar faces in there, but for those watching that might not be familiar, the timer is that'll kind of give us a little bit of a guidance of some to answer some more deep and meaningful kind of questions that we call it. So we'll set that for about halfway, and then as we sort of lead up to that, if there's big questions, you can ask it there. But of course, feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go, and we'll endeavour to answer them as Ben is showing us the ropes. Okay, Ben, take it away.
All right, so here I've got a couple of designs that I've made for like a story template. These essentially will be, the same template, just showing how you could apply it to different aspects. So here, I've tried to make it pretty, generically Instagrammy. We've got some nice, clean type, pretty photos, so that you could use this for if you're a photographer, if you're a videographer, or an illustrator as well. Here we've just thrown an illustrator asset in there. So this is going to kind of work on a system where you put in a piece of content, whether it's your work, and then you can have some text over the top. There's an option to swipe up some extra text up the top if you need that. And we'll show some other, and also we'll make a version where if you don't have a photo or anything, you can quickly just add some colors into the background and get, an interesting looking background without that. So the goal is for you to make a story, to create a new Instagram story in probably 30 seconds or less by the end of this, after we build this. And and then at the end of the stream, we'll give away whatever project file we've got at the end. I'll tidy it up, and you'll be able to use that for your own story templates.
Amazing.
All right, so I've designed this in Illustrator. I think what we're probably going to do is pretty much recreate all of this in After Effects so that it's all animatable and editable in there. But I think it's always great to design your work first before you animate it. We could, all of this, as we're going to do, you can create in After Effects, but it's much easier to design something when you're not thinking so much about the animation. Like when I made this, this took maybe, 30 minutes to design, and it's going to take hopefully, like an hour and a half to animate. But if we were to design and animate this in After Effects, I think it would take, much longer than that, the total time, and you end up with a better result because you're spending time concentrated on the design and then time concentrated on the animation. So now this is already designed, it's nothing too fancy, nothing particularly complicated. We're going to take it into After Effects and build it from there. So
there's the first question actually. How do you come up with the design? That one on the right was a project that we did last week.
Yes. So this is so we did it on Adobe Live. This is for the Adobe on a Heroes campaign. So this is one of my latest illustrations that I had ready. This is something that this is how I particularly use Instagram templates for my tutorials and stuff. I have a composition set up where I put in the image or video of what I want to do and then add text on top. So this is sort of me showing here's how the template might look if you're a photographer, and then a videographer if you're this one. And these are just some stock images that I found as well. I did not take these.
Cool.
All right, let's get into After Effects. So in After Effects, we're going to start pretty much completely on a blank canvas. I have imported the photos over here. So we've got a bunch of photos over here. We can see, you can probably make out a little preview in the top left so that we can throw in these and try to match the different colors. And then in our reference, I've got a little reference folder which has that design. So what I can do is drag that just into the new composition window, and that will create a new composition with those dimensions. Let's delete that for now, and I'll show how you can do that from scratch. If you want to do it from scratch, you just click this button, and here we get all of our our presets. Instagram stories, they've got to be in a 9:16 ratio. So we do 1080 by 1920, not 1820. That's going to look strange. And duration, I think it's 15 seconds. I believe is the maximum. Is that correct?
I don't know about the length actually, but yeah, with the 10, I always think about it just that it's 1080p, but flipped like the other way.
Yes.
That's how I always remember that.
1920. There we are. Right. Also, a top tip: if you can't remember, if you know the aspect ratio of an image, but you don't know what it'll be scale up to be. Let's say if you want to make something that's 4:3, but up to a 4K resolution, what you can do is put the width at something like width 40, height 30. So that's just the ratio of 4:3. And you can look aspect ratio and say, well, I will need to make it 5,000 pixels wide. And then it automatically generates the height as 6,667. So that's, if you remember the resolution and, and you need your output size, but, you don't know the exact dimensions, that's a quick way to do that. So width, 1080, height, 920. That looks good to us. All right, we've got our canvas ready to go. So I'm going to drag in that reference image just so we can work a bit on the design. So we have, a reference.
So Festus was asking, is it crucial to stack the Illustrator layers correctly before importing into After Effects? Or are you using it just as a guide, as a flat image?
I'm just using this as an image. I exported a PNG. So if you were to import it, we could do that in After Effects. I haven't layered this up too nicely. I've got the our borders at the top, and then the text, and then the image below. But yes, if you were to import all the assets, it's good to have them all separated into layers.
Cool. So
let's get started. So I think we might start by building out this border and the text. So for this reference image, I might just turn its opacity down to, let's say, 20%. And let's start with a border. So I'm just going to create a rectangle, and I'm just drawing it loosely because I know I am going to go into the rectangle path down here and set, the correct dimensions, which let's unlink this as well, that we know to be 1080 by 1920. So that's going to fit our canvas, and I'm going to open my align tools and just align that to the middle. So we've got a rectangle that takes up the full canvas, and let's rename this border front, and that's going to be this sort of white edge that we have here. So to do that, to give it that edge, we need to give it a stroke. So I can alt-click on stroke up here. Let's change that color to white. And for the fill, I'm going to alt-click, which cycles through all the fill options, so we can cycle through gradients or no fill. So no fill is what we want. And the stroke, let's drag that up till it kind of matches. There we go. I'm going to round that up to 75, so it's a little more pleasing and looks a little more considered when someone opens up the template. I always get curious whenever I open up a template at something's 63.728 millimeters wide, and I'm like, what? Did you just drag it? Did you just eyeball this?
You just eyeballed that, yeah.
Even though it doesn't really matter. I like to think that people aren't going to judge me the way I secretly judge everyone else.
I think it's a good habit to get into, especially when you're creating digital assets, is to try to work to an exact pixel, or at least, an exact percent. I think it's good. It's good practice for all your UI and interface design stuff as well. So if you're dipping into that at all, it is definitely good not to have multiple decimal points. You can end up with some funky looking designs.
It makes it easy if you want to do any math as well. You can easily figure out what's 50% of that without having to, resort to a calculator. All right, so to make this sort of internal little border that we have, I'm going to duplicate border front. I'm going to call that one border back, drag that underneath, and I'm going to change the stroke color. I'm just going to color it gray for now because we're going to change the colors later, and I'm going to increase the stroke. So we've got a little border color here. Oh, let's round up that number. What's it? That was around 100, close to 120. No, not 120. There we are. Okay, and I think, no, we're going to animate those a little bit later. Now let's add the text. Now there's two ways you can add text in After Effects, both with the type tool. If you just click with the type tool, you can just start typing story template, and that gives you, a piece of text, but it doesn't give you a text box. I really like using a text box because I think it gives me more control. It allows me to visually see things a little easier. And to get a text box, you just click and drag. And let's type in lowercase. Story template. No, that's not how you spell temp. All right, it's not in lowercase because our character panel is set to all caps. So let's select that and take that off. And also, let's get rid of that other template layer. So here we've got our text box. Let's where have all my panels? There they are. There are all my panels. All right. Let's set that to center align and align that to the center of our canvas. There we are. Let's change the character to, I believe, well, let's open up our Illustrator file. Always good to have it here ready to reference. Mm-hmm. We've got our character here. We're using Acumen Pro Condensed. Acumen Pro is available on Typekit. So if you've got Adobe in the Creative Cloud, you can get that for free. It is bold and set to 130 points, and we've got a tracking of 200. So let's replicate that.
There was a question from Nashad was saying, well, he said your animations are awesome, so I should pass that on.
Thank you very much. It's very lovely of you to say.
Correct, I agree. So it would be nice if you can tell us about the project export as a loop animation, which I'm sure we'll be doing.
As a loop animation?
Yeah.
I think we can figure out something with this to make it loop. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, let's see if we can get that towards the end. Okay. Acumen Pro. Oh, I want Acumen Pro Condensed. Condensed. There we are. Condensed. Bold. All right, so we've replicated that. It needs to be 130. And let's just adjust the line spacing and align that kind of how it is in Illustrator. All right, we've got our type here. Now let's duplicate that, and we're going to make some extra type at the top. Say extra text. That one's going to be a fair bit smaller. Let's go to maybe 80. 80. Let's change this from bold to light, I think. Is light good? Maybe. Oh, should we go even thinner? Let's go for it. Extra. Oh, that's not that much.
Living on the edge.
Thin. Oh. Yeah. I'm always a big fan of thin type, even though I know like it's not going to be readable at some distances. I think we should be okay here. People sit pretty close to their phones.
That's true.
And I'm going to duplicate. Oh, well, let's rename these. Instead of extra text, I'm going to call that top text. This is down here in the layer panel. And for its story template, I'm going to call that. I'm going to call these text main rather than main text. That's so if we look down here, we can see at a glance that everything that starts with text is text. Text. That's just, won't matter too much, but just anything you can do to make things a little easier on yourself will pay off. And we'll duplicate one more down here for swipe up, and for our text swipe. Actually, we do have that other text at the top as well here. So we've got just duplicating that text layer again. Shrink this one down. Oh, no, I typed 2020 into the size. We don't want 2000 point typeface. All right. 20, scale that down. And when you're working with typefaces, it's good to, if you can, match the line weight. So even though this one, because I've essentially scaled this one down by working at a smaller smaller font size, I'm going to increase the width from thin to light. Maybe not light, maybe extra light. Oh, we can see we've got a new follower down here. So if you want to be featured in the stream, give me a follow. Looks like I'm getting notifications. Thank you, GE. Appreciate it.
That's amazing.
Extra light. Okay. Maybe that's too. Maybe thin is fine. No, let's go to extra light. So there's just a bit of difference between these two. And I'm just going to make sure all of these type is centered. I'm going to select them all. Go. Oh no. Scroll on our tracking. Click our align. Oh, it's aligned to selection. Oh. Align to composition, center. All right, they should be all in the center now. And we've got a text there. So called text top. It's got a sub, like a little subheading at the top. Now, okay, our story text, has that gone?
Eric in chat was saying him and After Effects are not friends.
Oh no.
I think that does happen. I think there's a lot of designers like that, that are a bit afraid of kind of getting stuck in. Do you have any kind of advice on where to start or anything like that? You're going to get me
next to chat.
That's fine.
This is a great system. I definitely start. I definitely maybe start with design that's relatively simple. I think people like often, like certainly I did when I was getting into After Effects. I was like, you see the best animator stuff, and you think, right, I'm going to create that straight out of the gate. I think something really simple to do, especially for people who are designers, is to create maybe something like we're creating today, where it's just sort of a text and shape-based design where we're going to have subtle movement. We're not trying to do any crazy movement or characters or anything like that. Just something basic to get used to the main principles, which are moving in position and scale and those types of things. And also, don't feel the urge to understand what all of these panels do and everything. I barely use any of them. This paint panel, brushes, I don't know if I've ever used either of those in After Effects. Like, it's the majority of the time you spent animating the transition properties, the transform properties, which are position, scale, rotation. If you can, if you just learn those, you're going to be. That's all you need to know. That's the essentials that are going to make the majority of the difference. But yeah, like take it slow. Come up, thanks Ben Stillman. Come up with a maybe a little project to do, and just figure out how to make that project look good. And don't think about how are these other people doing crazy stuff. Think about, well, how do I get this piece of art, this piece of design to move how I want it, and work from there.
It's good advice. I like that it's like a Twitch. It's like a Twitch feature or something.
It is. I know. We should have a little
little dancing cat.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And also, like After Effects is very intimidating because I think similar to like maybe some of Adobe's other software, like because it has to serve so many people. It serves motion designers, traditional animators, VFX artists, 3D compositors. Like it has a lot of features for lots of people. Like you don't, not all of them, you need to know because not all of them, are for you. All right, so let's now get some of these other details here. We've got these little line details across here. So there's a couple of ways we can create that. I'm going to do it a pretty, I don't want to say hacky way, but a way that might not be that intuitive. So that I think will be very quick. So I'm just going to create a rectangle. We've got a big stroke from earlier. Let's take that down to, I think, 2 points. 2 points is a nice stroke. Let's align that to the middle of the composition. And then with my rectangle tool selected, I'm going to, thanks, Yavuz, sorry, the name pronunciation.
Thanks for subscribing to my channel.
Thanks for subscribing. I'm going to select this tool this menu over here, which is Tool Creates Mask. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, but I'm not going to create another shape. I'm going to create a mask, and I'm just going to cover pretty much right in the middle of that rectangle. So we're just cutting off the edges, so we don't get the edges of that rectangle. And now we can go into our rectangle path. Its size, I'm going to unlink these properties and shrink that down, and then move that to either side of our text. Length to center. Let's make it 340, maybe 325. There we are. And its width we can make 500. We're probably going to edit that later. Oh, but if we now I'm going to need to edit that mask because it's all within the bounds of our mask. But that's not too hard. We can just double click on the mask and drag these in. So we just cut off the left edges there. And this is going to mean that we can customize this really easily later when we set up some more templating features. And let's nudge that down so it's a bit more centered with our text. All right, the only other thing we need to create is our little triangles down here. So triangles, let's rename this to, let's call this just lines. We're not going to have any other lines, so that should be a fine descriptor. So to create a triangle isn't always obvious in lots of softwares because you got your rectangle tool, you got your ellipse tool, you're like, all right, you got your polygon tool, all right, I can create, squares and rectangles and like polygons. But, where's the triangle tool? Squares, circles, triangles, they're the basic shapes. So you need to use either, well, I think we can use the polygon tool or the star tool. Let's create the polygon tool. I think it's called the polystar tool in some Adobe programs. And let's just click and drag and draw a polygon. Now, here we are, polystar down here. So now we have polystar, and it has polystar path, transform polystar path. We have points here. So we've got 5 points. So if we increase that, we get, a hectagon, octagon, dodecahedron. But if we go down to 3, we get a perfect equilateral triangle.
Cool.
And that's pretty much what we need down here. And that's just a quick way to create a triangle, because you could create it with a pen tool, trace over what we've got here. And that's also a fine way to do it. Here, well, it is an equilateral triangle at the moment. So we kind of want to make that, isosceles that a tiny bit. So what we can do is, I think if we go to, we need to find its path. If we right click, convert to Bezier path. Here, convert to Bezier path. That will just turn this into a regular path. It's no longer a polystar, so we can't transform its sides, but we can, bring these down. That looks about the same ratio. I'm going to double click and then hold Shift and Alt, or Control and Alt, and just drag that down. And I'm going to try to align that up with our design. There's
a question in chat. Is there anything that you can't do?
Anything that I can't do? Oh, there's many things that I that I can't do. We'll get to that when when questions will come up and I'll say, no, it's too hard. One of the finding out things, avoiding those things is. I'm not going to recommend avoiding things you can't do. Learn how to do them if they're important. But also, know when to fold them. Okay, I'm going to call this triangle 1. And I'm going to duplicate this and drag this down to match here. And let's drag this below that one. So triangle 1's on top, and let's color that one white. Okay. Now, the last thing to add is our background. So what I'm going to do is we'll call this comp 1 over here. Let's rename that comp 1. Let's call this story template. I'm going to call it AO1 for now, because we might version this up a little bit later. Excuse me. And let's create a new composition. And we've already got our dimensions in from the previous, from creating this composition. Let's increase this a bit. I'm going to lock the ratio and increase this up to 2,500 pixels. We have a slightly bigger version. And in here, we are going to drop one of our photos. And I'm going to, a quick way to fit a photo to the width of your comp is, you press Control, Alt, Shift, and either H. Oh, wait. Oh, no. That's not what I know what's. I got the shortcut wrong and it's opened something else. All right, let's just scale this down. Oh no, Control Alt Shift. Oh no, I think our Zoom is using similar shortcuts to this.
Oh, Zoom.
But
there's a lot
Control Alt Shift G. Control Alt Shift G will match the size of your layer to the composition height.
Nice.
Or you could also go to composition, I think it's composition, or layer, transform, fit to comp width, or height.
Great.
So
there was a tip that someone gave out before as well. With you can double click the shape tool to automatically make the rectangle the comp size as well, which came.
Oh, awesome! I'm going to be using that. That's great. I did that with masks. I didn't know you could do it with the shape layers. That makes sense. Very good tip. I appreciate that. All right.
Good job.
We're all learning every day.
Every day.
So comp 1, let's rename that to, let's call that asset. That sounds pretty, be hard like a nice spy film, like we have the asset. And let's put that into our pre-comps folder. So I've called this asset because you might use a photo, you might use a video, you might use whatever you need.
And we're
So
setting this
this
up
is
in the way, like in particular, that it is a template. So that's why being very particular in kind of what you label it. Like, you know, for those joining us as well, yeah, this is asset could be, yeah, it could be anything. Could be your design, piece of design work, photography. Yeah.
absolutely. So I'm making this in a separate comp so that ideally you open up this folder and you open up the asset comp and you just drag whatever footage, art you have into here, and everything will all be generated within the main comp. So you just drag your footage into here and then you know, make some edits in here. I also misspelled template again here. Template, there we are. Okay, so now let's drag in our asset to the background, and let's drag that to the bottom of the layer stack, and let's start animating some of these. So why we've made this big at the start is so we can play with the scale. So with our asset comp, I'm going to press S to bring up the scale properties, scale at the start, and then at the end of 15 seconds, let's take this down to maybe 95%. So there's going to be a slight, I'm going to zoom out. That's way too slow. We need to go down to, let's try 80%. And make sure we center that so it fits in. So we get over, so over 15 seconds, we get a slight zoom out. Maybe we wanted to go a bit faster. Let's go to 75. And okay, it's wide enough, but it still fits within the border. Okay, that's pretty good. I like that, just a subtle zoom there. So I think, you know, just tiny bits of animation, you know, this kind of thing, a subtle zoom won't really affect, you know, too much of, you know, the visibility or anything of the asset, but just adds a little bit of movement, a bit of motion that it kind of looks like, you know, they care, they put a bit of, you know, effort into this. And that's why we made our composition bigger. So by the time we get down to 75%, we didn't have to scale things up or anything like that. So
and if you brought it in, let's say you crop the image to be exactly the same size as the canvas, and then you stretched out, are we automatically stretching pixels? Is that why you've reversed the process?
Yes, that's right. So I'm starting at 100 and going down. Going down to 75. That's, you know, you could, you know, start at 75 and go to 100, or, you know, start at, you know, something similar. But I try to, you know, avoid going over 100 if you can. We've scaled down our image, so we could, you know, continually rasterize it, and it would be fine. But this is, you know, just easier to do because the images are pretty high resolution, and, you know, we won't run into any troubles doing this.
Cool.
All right, so let's add a bit more animation. Let's add some animation to our borders. Let's also recolor these borders. I'm going to color these cyan, just so I can separate them from our lines and triangles. And let's recolor our triangles orange as well. Okay, so our borders. So we want to animate the stroke width, which is how we're creating these borders. Now, to get to stroke width, you have to toggle down a lot of these: asset, rectangle, stroke, to get to stroke width. Or what you can do is we have a search bar up here and select the layers we need and just start typing in stroke. Then we've got stroke width here. So we can keyframe both of those at the start. And let's actually, we want them to finish up at this length. So let's go to 1 second and have them at, you know, 75 and 120. And let's maybe have them, do we want the border to animate to get bigger or smaller? Let's say, let's try it coming bigger. So let's go to 100 and maybe 300. So as the story enters, we're going to have a little layout. And I'm going to easy ease those with F9. And I think I want this closer one to be even bigger. 150. Yeah, I think 150. That's good. Now let's change the speed. Go into the graph editor. Let's go to the speed graph. Select these, and I'm just going to drag this handle over to the left so we can see in the graph editor here. Let's push these over here. So the speed of this animation is going to be really high at the start and then ease off to the end. So as soon as we swipe onto the story, you just get a little animation of the border, which is, you know, just a little nice subtle touch to let you know, hey, this, you know, this story template's animated. Although this story is animated, you want to be watching this. This information must be valuable. It just adds a bit more production value. And let's now I think we want this border to be on top. So it kind of reveals this text at the bottom here. So that's not on top. Swipe up, we're going to do an animation for, and same with this story template. So for these lines, so we're going to animate these lines sort of coming out. Let's change that stroke color to white, so that's a bit more obvious while we're animating them. That's lines, and we're going to animate these with scale. So we can press S on a keyboard. I want to unlink the dimensions because I only want to animate this axis, the x-axis.
Right.
So let's keyframe that at 100%. Let's maybe at 4 seconds in. Then the start. Let's take it down to 20 and ease that. Let's see how that looks. All right. Well, that's very fast. Okay, let's drag this further over. Oh, okay. That's not 4 seconds. That's 4 frames. Let's zoom out much further. Okay. There we are. Okay, that's much more of a pace that we want. Okay, let's go into the graph editor and make a similar. Oops, let's go to the speed graph. Similar shape, so by pushing these handles in. So animate really fast at the start. And maybe spread that out a bit more. Let's zoom out and see. Maybe we want to start at 0, so it has no width. Thank you, Crispin.
New follower.
New follower. Okay, we've got a little bit of animation going there. And maybe this text at the top, maybe move its position a bit. Okay, so I know I want to swipe up to animate from the bottom up. So I think our animation at the top should animate downwards. I think if it's up, it's going to push too much attention upwards away from the middle here. Whereas if the bottom one is coming from the bottom and the top one's coming from the top, our attention is going to be pushed towards the middle, which is what we want people to read. So let's go extra text. Where is that? Text top. Let's keyframe its position here. And then at the start, let's move this up a touch. And let's actually, over here, parent text top sub, a little 2020, to our text top with the pick whip. So now it is now a parent or a child of text top. So now whenever we move the text top, that little, our 2020 follows. So let's push this all the way off screen. And what we can do, because I like this easing that we've established here, I'm going to use a plugin which is really useful called Ease Copy. So we've got a window and go to Ease Copy. It's a free plugin and it just allows us to copy the easing values from here and then paste down here. So now we have the same easing values on extra text here. That's probably a bit too slow, so we can increase that just by shortening the keyframe so it happens faster. Okay, let's go into the graph editor and see if we can tweak that a bit more, make that faster. There we are, we've got it coming in from the top. Not bad. Now let's do pretty much the same with the swipe up. So we've got text swipe up. Let's keyframe its position there. At the bottom, drag that off screen. We can try copying and pasting those easing values again, see if those help. Okay, so we've got a bit of text coming in. And let's see for our arrows, animate those as well. So I'm going to, let's keep it in their position, and we're going to use that same easing, but then we're probably going to offset them. So let's drag these down, maybe drag them down a bit further. Copy that easing, paste it onto these keyframes. Okay, so that looks pretty similar. If we spread that out a bit, our triangle is going to move a little bit more. Maybe we want our triangle to come up first. Maybe the first triangle to hit, its final position first as well. Maybe we should spread these out a bit more.
Has like a little bit of a fade, like it looks like it's the second triangle's following the first one.
Yeah, exactly. So we just want to create, a bit of, depth in the animation so that everything's not just, swiping up all at once, which, looks a bit like, a PowerPoint kind of effect. Because we have, more tools in After Effects, may as well use them. Now, you'll see I'm just playing and repeating this animation a lot. When you're in After Effects, you're going to be a lot of it is just rewatching what you've done and seeing, does that feel right? Can I make it feel better? And I think there's something about this that I think it needs maybe some work. Maybe swipe up is a bit too fast. Maybe that should lag further behind. Let's go and look at the whole thing. Let's fit canvas up to 100%. There we are. And I think we want the swipe up to happen after this has already come on. So let's move our text swipe, triangle swipe up next to each other in the timeline and start those maybe 1 second in, or maybe 2 seconds. So ideally you read what this story's about, and then we've got a little call to action, swipe up, it might say, visit website or something, or, new photo edit, something, swipe up, and we've got a link to that. Story template, swipe up. Okay. Now let's figure out what we can do here. Maybe, I'm not sold on this easing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the position dimensions. So I'm going to right click, separate dimensions, get rid of the x-axis ones, and let's just focus on the y-axis ones. So I'm going to ease those with F9, go into the graph editor. Let's go into the value graph, because I think the value graph is a bit more, it's not necessarily more powerful than the speed graph, but I just find it a lot more intuitive to get, results that I want. So here we can get a much snappy ease. That feels much better to me. And now I think we should be able to copy that ease and apply that to our triangles. And it should work. It might. Yeah, that's looking good. We can spread that out a bit more.
Estes was saying maybe the arrows bounce at the top.
Arrows bounce. I want to disagree, Festus. I mean, it's a good suggestion, but I think, because we want, a swiping action, I think maybe we want to mirror that motion a little bit more, and you might not sort of bounce so much. It would bring more attention to it and make people look at it a bit more, though. A bounce is good for that. But maybe we can try a bouncing version. We can do a bouncing alternate version afterwards.
Nice.
Okay, and I really like this easing better, so I'm going to copy that easing and then paste that to our extra text up the top here. And I'm also going to animate this little subtext as well. So even though it's still parented to our extra text, I'm going to add a bit more animation. I'm going to keyframe its position, and then at the top, I'm just going to nudge it up a bit more, and then paste that easing as well. So hopefully, what that should look like is that it's sort of moving a bit faster and breaking away from the top text. It's really subtle, to make it a bit more obvious. So, and let's move this keyframe back a little bit as well. So it continues moving a little bit more. There we are. And let's try pasting that easing on the lines as well. I like that easing, so I'm gonna use it a lot. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And let's give it a go on the border as well. This is why, oh wait, too much on the border. Okay, there we go. Let's play this back. Let's see, is this moment where it swipes up too fast and invasive? Could that be a little slower? It might be fine. Maybe I'll slow it down a touch just by dragging this keyframe back. And then I might make these ones a bit shorter so you can still get that bit of, overlapping action. Okay. All right, I think we're pretty good there for our animations.
Nice.
So our template is all animated, I think, and yeah, I think we might be ready to get into some templatizing some actions. And here we can tweak the animation a little bit later, but you want to make sure, before you save this template and start using it, your animation is as good as it can be. When you're doing a template, and like particularly, more time spent in the animation at the beginning is going to pay off a lot more because you're going to use it hundreds and hundreds of times, but you only have to animate it once. Even though you're spending twice as much time animating it at the start, that will that's going to pay off eventually.
Yeah, totally. We've got like 6 minutes until Q&A. We can just start Q&A now if you prefer, because we've got lots of stuff to do.
I reckon we can do that. Let's start Q&A now. If we've got some questions in the chat, and then we can have the back half some lovely templating, and then lots of we can do some little tweaks and some other things as well. Maybe get to Festus's bets.
Nice. Festus's. I like it.
For the rest of us.
Festivus for the rest of us. So there's been some great questions come through. How long did it take you to master After Effects?
I've been using After Effects.
Who was
thanks, G.
Who was featured, a featured follower in the stream earlier.
I'd say I've been using After Effects sort of like professionally for like 5, maybe 6 years now. Like that's working, that means like every day it's my job to be in After Effects and make things move. I probably about 3 years before that was tinkering, maybe spend, an hour or two on it a month. But yeah, once I started, I've been, working, using it professionally about 5-6 years. And I think that's, that makes a big difference. Like when it's your job to do something and you have to do it 8 hours a day, every day for a week, that's, you get, you learn to get proficient at it, especially when there's, producers and clients breathing down your neck when you have to get stuff done. It's not, I should, when you think, I should learn this and you tinker with it a bit here and there, like actually being forced, it's like someone's paying you to do stuff makes you, accountable for getting better. Just doing
a good motivation.
Yes, exactly.
Sort of thinking, I should learn that. I should learn that. Actually having a project and a deadline. That's probably good advice because I think After Effects is probably one of those apps that we mentioned it before. There's traditional designers might be a bit standoffish, and you gave some great advice before. And do you think that it would be worth like giving themselves a deadline or giving themselves a project or trying to include animation in a real life project as a motivator?
For sure. Definitely. I think, project-based learning is the best. Like, have a design that you've already made. You've got a little bit easier because you already have design skills that you don't have to, learn design as well. Because I think design is a much harder thing to learn than animation. I think people that learn animation and then have to go back and learn design to bring that work to the next level, it's a lot harder of a journey. And it's not as clear. There's not so many resources. Animation is a lot more, like certainly there's, artistry and creativity in it, but a lot of it, the initial barrier is the technical skills, and learning that there's a relatively clear progression. There's lots of resources. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got a course. There's plenty of other courses out there as well. There's lots of resources for learning animation. I mean, we've got plenty of Adobe streams for that as well. Yeah, I think getting a project saying like, here's a simple design I've got. Let's animate this. I've got a week or 2 weeks or something like that. I think that is very good to have. I work to a deadline to get a YouTube video out every week, and that's if I didn't have that deadline, if I think I'll do a video whenever, like I reckon half of the videos I made just wouldn't have gotten made. Yeah. So having that deadline is really very motivating.
Yeah, perfect. Especially now, I think for people at home trying to find the motivation to do and learn those new skills and all that sort of stuff, if that's something that you're able to do at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Michelle was saying she might, it was like 1 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock in the morning or something where Michelle is. So if you're still there, hardcore. She started with Adobe Animate last week, but not sure. Would After Effects be easier or harder to learn first?
I'd say After Effects would be easier to learn first. Animate is, I think it's certainly less in line with the other Adobe apps. Like I'm sure you're probably more familiar with After Effects, Illustrator, maybe InDesign. Like After Effects is a lot closer to that family, partly because it was, Animate was acquired later by Adobe, so it still, has, so it has a different origin. It's further, away in the tree of life, in the evolutionary line of Adobe platforms. The latest updates have brought it way more in line, so that is better. But I think, frame by frame is it's very specific thing. It's a lot more specific and niche than After Effects. Like in After Effects, you can animate way more stuff. It's more broad, so the tools are a lot more, accepting. It's all the tools you're familiar with. You'll see on the toolbar. You know what the type tool, rectangle tool does. You know what the align properties are. The align composition window. It's easy. I'd definitely start in After Effects for sure.
Cool. Two related sort of questions, so I'll do them both. Where do you find the time to sleep with the amount of work you're producing? And does Ben Marriott rest, or is he a machine?
I do find time to sleep normally in the evenings. Almost exclusively in the evenings. Naps on weekends though. I suppose now during quarantine times, there's less. I'm certainly doing less socializing, so it's probably work is eaten into that a bit. I try to have a decent work-life balance, but I should. I think everyone, and I certainly should be better at that. But I try not to work too many hours. But I think it appears like I'm doing more work than I'm actually doing because my face is out there probably more than most people who are actually doing hard work, sitting at desks for 12 hours a day. Yes, but I do find time to rest. I am resting, and I'm gonna rest more.
Cool, very good. Rest is very important.
It is. Your work will get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's super important. Another question. I'm not sure I understand this. So it might be an After Effects question. So I'm sorry if maybe we'll see if you do. How hard would it be if you could do all this with 3D layers and camera?
You could definitely do this with 3D layers and a camera. I don't like really using 3D layers in After Effects. I don't find it that intuitive. Like it's pretty good for simple things. Something like this you'd be okay with, but I think it's a bit more trouble than it's worth for the effect you get. Like, I don't typically do a lot of 3D sort of camera movements in my animation. I have done for lots of client projects and things like that, but I prefer not to. It's tricky working with because you have to work with the camera, where this camera is pointing, where the position of the camera is, the rotation 360 degrees. It's just trickier to do with. If I have to make some sort of 3D movement, like a parallax in After Effects, I kind of prefer to do it, brute force it in 2D, just using like maybe some null layers and faking it with a position. Because if you're doing something very complicated, you should definitely use a 3D camera. But it's for what I do, I don't really ever have to. I can avoid it if I want to.
Right. Okay. Cool. Johanna was asking, speaking of work-life balance, how do you manage it? And why is it by rewatching all of the Jurassic Park movies?
I haven't watched the Jurassic Park movies in a long time. I should. I kind of balance it like, having deadlines that I know every Thursday a tutorial needs to get out. I know that I'm going to work from, Monday to Friday. Ideally, I have set hours where I, start and stop. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes there's, especially meetings in different time zones that, have to happen. But yeah, I have actually one really practical thing I do have is a really strict editorial calendar, which is probably the most useful thing I use. It's a big spreadsheet, like just a Google sheet. And I just have essentially like a day, like year to day calendar. Is that what they call it? It's,
right.
It's a year to view day calendar. So I have every row is a day, and I have, the months color coded, and it has this day here. And I have, all my Thursdays blocked out in pale orange that has the idea for the tutorial, so I know what tutorials are coming up, what I need to make, and then I can see at a glance, okay, and I change the color of the tutorial once it's complete and say, okay, well, I'm 2 tutorials ahead. The next tutorial is this. Will I have room to do some other projects in between doing tutorials, or I think, oh well, I need to make some tutorials because we're getting right up to the line, right. And those things like that. And I can plan out when my Instagram posts are going to be. Which are normally every Monday or Tuesday, and then the tutorials every Thursday, and I can draft in the text for the description in a cell in the spreadsheet, so I can copy and paste that into Instagram, and excuse me, and similar things like that. Where that's sort of how that's my life in a spreadsheet I see there, and I have a little column for my primary tasks to do each day as well, so I can think, oh wow, all right, well I have that's a new addition to the spreadsheet. So I can think, I have So let's say I have tutorial, like I have a tutorial that I'm collaborating with, and with an illustrator called Sandro. So I have 3 days in my calendar where I've just put Sandro, Sandro, Sandro. So those 3 days is when I'm primarily focused on working on that.
Mm.
And I know a tutorial normally takes 2 days, so I can block those out easily and kind of see at a glance if I'm behind schedule, ahead of schedule, and where I am. And for me, that might seem a lot like overkill, but I'm a pretty neurotic person, and if I didn't have it all written down somewhere that I could look at, I would just be thinking about it, like trying to do calculations in my head, all day. So
Yeah.
that's something that really helps me.
Mm. Yeah, I really like that. Have you always done that, or is that a new thing?
No, that's a pretty new thing. I started about when I started freelancing and working from home. I did that. Yeah, that especially, and then it got every year I evolved the spreadsheet. So I think, all right, what was some information I would like to have that I didn't have last year when I made the spreadsheet, and then add extra features, extra rows and columns, and remove some that aren't necessary. But when I started doing the YouTube stuff, that's when it really became a primary focus. That's what I do first thing in the morning. Check that, update that with any information there.
Awesome.
And that's also really handy because you can move things around easily. I can just copy and paste and see, well, if I were to do this, not this week, but next week, would I still be able to get the other stuff done this week?
Right.
So that's handy to me. I know people recommend apps like Notion. That's something, I've played with. I have, I use Evernote mainly. That might be a bit too overkill for me. I have that spreadsheet, and then I have like a notebook which has, my daily to-dos in there, and that's about it. I like to keep it as sort of minimal as possible. Sometimes I think if it's something becomes too much like efficiency and organization, like maintaining that becomes more work in itself.
Yes.
So for me, I know the spreadsheet maybe probably sounds like that to a lot of people, but it's actually not that much at all. For me, it fits that balance nicely.
Yeah, I'm all about the spreadsheets as well. Maybe last question, Amanda. Good to see you in there, Amanda. What does a passion project look like for you?
Oh, well, passion project for me. I'm actually working on one at the moment. So I think I teased Flynn about this a bit earlier. So it's called Project Manticore because it's important to have a very cool name for a project. I find so. It's a big collaborative project because because I'm doing YouTube tutorials every week, I don't have much time to make long projects. Like when I say long projects, I'm talking 10 seconds plus. Like, normally, someone might make a personal project and it's, either a few 10-second animations or maybe a 1 minute animation or something. But, I struggle to find the time to do those sorts of things. So I thought a way for me to make a bigger project was to collaborate with a lot of animators. So I've got this project, Project Manticore. So I think we've got almost 60 animators involved, and we've all interpreted a single theme. The theme is for Manticore 2020 is love. So sort of 60 interpretations of that theme. They're each 1.5 seconds long. So it's a 2-minute animation of just like, ideally, nonstop, really great animation. So I just, give it to awesome animators and say, hey, go nuts, interpret this theme. Do whatever you want. Here's a color palette. Here's some dimensions and things for you to use, some constraints, and then together I'm gonna put it all together. Get sound design. It's in sound design at the moment, which is very exciting. Awesome. I'm excited to hear that come back with audio, and hopefully I'm going to be releasing it end of May or beginning of June, depending on how the sound design goes. And yeah, I'm going to start hyping that up for people soon. So here's a little sneak peek of what to expect. So and I've been working on that since I think October. I started. Wow. I think I wrote the brief for that then. Yeah. So that's so I'm in initial plans for planning Manticore 2021. Wow. So my idea, I would love to do that once every year. That's my plan. I'm going to soft commit to do that once every year, because that is something that I can do to break the cycle a bit. Like I have my routine of doing one YouTube video a week, but then also a long overarching project, which still isn't not that involved. It's still quite involved to produce it and organize it with 60 animators, but I'm not having to animate 2 minutes of work. So that's what a personal project looks like for me. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome. Thanks for the questions, everybody. Yeah, Manticore
awesome.
2020.
Yeah, please.
Awesome. That's great. All right. Well, let's get stuck into part Part 2.
Okay, part 2. So I think, okay, I have some notes up here. All right, so templating is, so in the templating process, let's save this. What we really want to do here is make this as easy to edit as possible. So if we were to come into this project and wanted to make changes, that we do it really easily. So a few things that we can do, first of all, is let's, what we're going to need to animate. Let's do the colors. So the colors, first of all. So in our example, let's pop over to Illustrator. We've got this inside border and the lines and this bottom triangle are all the same color, and that's selected from our background image. So to do that, I'm going to link those all together. So if we were to change the color of one, it would change the color of all of them. And what's really useful in a template is to have a controller layer. So you can create a controller layer by using a null or an adjustment layer. Either's fine. Let's do a null layer, new null object. Essentially, it's just a blank layer that has nothing. Like, it has nothing in it. All we're using this layer for is to control other aspects of the template. So let's call this controller, and we can even hide that layer as well so we don't see that green thing in the middle. And I'm going to add an effect called the fill. The fill effect. Let's go to our effects panel and type in fill, and we've just got a color selection. If we apply this effect to if we apply this effect to our lines, it'll fill our lines red. So what we can do here is with our fill layer, we can go up to composition. Oh, is that no effect? Composition? No, edit. Edit. Copy with relative property links. So copy with relative property links, and we want to paste this fill onto border back. We want to paste it onto our lines and on triangle 2. So they are all they all have that red filled in here. But if we, I think now if we change that color, here. So now if we change this color on our controller layer, we can make it black, we can make it orange, and it updates all of those assets there. So that's really, really useful to have in here. So and we can rename this from fill to, let's call this secondary color. And so if you were to come in, so let's just say we want to change our asset. We want to use this, that one's a bit short. We want to use this blue background. Actually, maybe not the blue background. We've got this picture of a bird. Nice picture of a bird. Let's go back into our story template. We open up our control layer, and these colors don't match. So let's select our secondary color, and we can eye drop maybe the red from the bird. So now we've got our color selection made here, or we can just choose one of these blue colors, and it's really easy to, adjust this based on your content. Let's also make one for our primary color. So let's add another fill effect. Oh, that's eye drop fill, not that one. Fill down here. Let's select white at the moment. Make sure that's 100% white. Let's call that primary color. Let's drag that on top. And again, edit, copy with relative property links. And here, let's paste this on front. So select front, triangle 1, text swipe, and all of our other text as well. And then paste. So now at the top, we've got a controller layer here, and we've got 2 fill options. So our primary color is white. We can change that or eye drop that to black. And now our primary color is black. Let's probably keep this for white now. And then our secondary color here. So within just a couple of clicks, you can change the color palette of everything. And that's something I use a lot. That when I was working in staff positions, one of our clients was like a betting company, and we had to make weekly updates of the NRL and AFL. So I had a template that I customized to all the different team colors, like who was versing who at different times. So I'd have to make 3 of those every week. So I made a big elaborate template where I just had all the team's colors, and I could eye drop them instantly to change the color of everything. Because otherwise that would have taken a long time. Let's go in and change this photo back to the trees. I like the trees. A lot easier to see our text. And let's change our color back. And of course, you don't need to eye drop these from your image. That's just a way to make it look, all internally consistent. We can pick our own fill color here if you prefer that. If you want maybe some contrast, maybe something like that, up to you. But now you have options here, and it's really easy. Let's get back to that orange. I like that orange. Now, what are some other things we can do? So you might have a post where you don't need to have any swipe up. So,
well, that was actually something I was going to mention at some point. Is not everybody has the swipe up feature.
Oh yes, of course.
We're not all verified influencers like yourself. And if people try to swipe up on my phone, nothing happens.
All right. Well, for those occasions, we're going to create an extra controller up here. So what you could do is you could, just select these layers and hide them. That does that. But I've got to select. How many clicks is that? 1, hold shift, 2, 3, 4. 4 clicks to hide those. And you want to set up templates so that you can give them to someone who, isn't, ideally as involved in After Effects. Not that that's particularly an involved maneuver, hiding some layers, but if you can make it easier for someone, you should do that. So we're going to add another object up here, which is a checkbox. So we go up to here, the checkbox. We've got expression controls, checkbox control. So this control, it just adds it to our control layer, and we've got a little checkbox so we can select on or off. Now, at the moment, this doesn't do anything. This is just, we've added a little controller that we can check. But I want to link that to turn our swipe on and off. So to do that, I'm going to start with our swipe up here, and I'm going to use an expression. And so with our controller here, what we can do is we can lock our effects control panel here. So at the moment we're on our controller, we can see the effects with our controller. But if we move to our text swipe, it shows us the effect for the text swipe, which just has a primary fill on it at the moment. So what we want to do is we want to keep the controller's effects visible. So what we can do is just lock that up here. So now I can click on any other layer, and our primary controller effects stay visible. So that's going to be really handy for what we're about to do next. So for text swipe, we are going to add an expression to its transparency, or its opacity. So we press T on our keyboard to bring up opacity, and we need to write an expression. And this expression, this is a pretty hardcore expression. This is, normally I'm not that into expressions, but this one is very useful, and I haven't used it an awful lot. So let's see if there's any errors, if I can troubleshoot them. Cool. So to write an expression, we need to alt-click the stopwatch, and it brings up our little window here. But this one I'm very proud of, because I got it to work when I was testing this, and I felt like an absolute hacker. So we're going to write an if-else statement. Anyone that's programming would be like, oh my God, that's the most basic thing. But for me, for an animator, this is hardcore stuff. So for an if-else statement, we need to type. So what that means is, so if something happens, then do this. Else something else. So what we really want to say is, if this checkbox is ticked, let's untick it for the moment. If that checkbox is ticked, make this invisible. Make the opacity of this layer 0. So we want to say if, and we want to if, and then put in brackets if. Now, After Effects is really good at giving you hints for expressions. So if we type I, it gives up all the expressions that we can have with I. So put if. I'm going to start a parentheses, and it's going to automatically add a second one, so we can type underneath. But instead of typing, I'm going to drag the pick whip and drag that to the checkbox control. And it's going to, when I release, it's going to add all this here. So it says if, and then it's got all this written here, which is, this comp, layer, controller, effect, checkbox, control, checkbox. What that means is if inside this comp, the layer called controller, its effect called checkbox control, which is this, is checked. It's just saying if this thing, that's all it means. If this layer here. So it's just directions for the computer where to point at. If that is, and I'm going to put greater than 0, because this is reading as a 0 or 1 value, and close parentheses. So that should be if this is happening. So if this checkbox is greater than 0, put in curly brackets 100. So make the opacity of this layer 100. else 0. 0. So it's either going to be 0 or 100 based on what's this checkbox is. Now, I think I've written that entirely correct. We're going to get a little orange bar here if that's wrong. It works.
First
Okay,
time.
now if we click, there we are. So, and we notice it's hidden. So we've got a checkbox control. If we tick that on and off,
Cool.
on and off, we can hide the swipe layer.
That's awesome.
So now right? It's like, isn't it great?
Yeah, I'm
now
with you.
We can,
I'm not,
yeah.
I'm not super familiar with coding either. Like, wow, we just hacked into the Pentagon. The only thing I would have given you bonus points if, as soon as it worked, you said we're in.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
I'm
so
in.
let's yeah. So here we've got this expression here. We've already written that. We want to apply that to a few other things. So what we can do is we can right-click over opacity and right-click copy expression only. This is useful if you have an expression on different layers that have different values, and you only want the expression. You don't want whatever properties are attached here. We just want the expression, even though for here they would be the same. So we can select a triangle, and if we just paste, let's hide that checkbox. So if we just paste that on triangle 2, will that hide? No. Oh, it does. And triangle 1, there we are. We're in. So now we've got a checkbox control. Let's call that swipe up, question mark. Swipe up, tick it. We've got our swipe up here. So essentially what I'm trying to do is make this controller layer. Anyone that comes into this file, all they have to edit is, is this layer here, really. I mean, the text layer as well, but that's, that's unrelated. Now what we can do is something that you're going to find often in templates and is really useful in working in After Effects as well, is to shy your layers. So these layers here, let me press U to hide that expression. Our triangle layers, we don't need to use those anymore. The animation is done. The only thing we want to change is the color or whether they're visible. That's all done with the control layers. So what we can do is hide them from this layer. So what we do is shy them. So we click this button down here, which I'm not sure if you know it, but it's a man looking over a wall and his nose is hanging over. But when you click it, he shies and goes and hides behind the wall. So what that means is these are now shy layers. And if we click this button over here, which is hide all layers, which shy is hide all layers for which the shy switch is set by the seashore.
Thought that looked a lot like Kilroy.
Yes, I think it does. Yeah.
I don't know if that's where it's from or anything like that, but it looks exactly like that little Kilroy drawing.
I'm not sure. But we can, if we click on this, now these layers are hidden. They still exist. If we look at our, our layer index, it goes 1, 2, 3, 7. So, and we can unhide this and those layers come back. But that just means they're not visible in a timeline, which means we don't have to worry about them. That is really useful if you have a timeline with lots and lots of layers and, you don't need to focus about animating a certain part at the moment. So now if someone opens up this template, they're not, they don't have to see those layers at the bottom. Same with, let's say, our borders. We don't need to edit our borders. Hide. What else we got? Our asset layer. We can keep that one on there. We've got our draft. We can delete our draft layer. Text main, we might want to edit. And yeah, this text we might want to edit. So let's leave that there. And lines as well. Lines we can shy, but I think we can edit that as, we can add another controller to that as well. So ideally, someone comes into this comp and they say, okay, we've got 3 text things that we can edit and a controller that controls everything else.
Yeah,
they don't need to
really
worry about
simplifying it down.
Exactly, and this is really useful not just for someone who's, if you were handing this project over to a noob who's, an After Effects noob, like I do this for my own layers when I come in. Like I don't need to think or scroll through anything else. Past me has already decided. I don't need to worry about that. So I'm just focusing on these. So also a really useful thing to be aware of, that not many people are, well, I certainly wasn't aware of it until like last year, is guide layers. So if we open up our asset comp here, I'm going to add some text. And that's just going to say what? Place your footage. This is like a little, instruction to someone who opens this comp. Place your footage, maybe put in this comp a little more instructional, and if we were to go back into our story template layer, now we've got this text all over it.
Right.
We don't want that, but we want some little instructions in here. So what we can do is simply right click on it and choose, where is it? Guide layer. So that adds this little icon over here, which looks like our, our guides, our rulers, and the Adobe Suite. So now if I go up to the next comp, that's hidden. So it's only visible on that layer, and it won't render out either. So this is just slightly visible here, and we can turn the transparency down as well. Actually, no, let's turn it up. And normally, what I might do here is, we can uncheck these effects that effects control as well, because I want to add some effects to this. Or maybe not, maybe just change the color. Normally, I like to make a guide layer something like really obnoxiously colored. So it looks like, maybe not. Yeah, like 100% green. Just so people know that, okay, this isn't going to render. Or if it does, it's obvious, then they're going to, because if this was white and it's the same font, let's change the font as well to something mono-spaced. Do I have a mono space type over here? BCR, this actually looks kind of cool, actually. A nice V8.
Yeah, it's not bad.
VHS look. But yeah, just little those are the little things I do to make sure that, hey, this isn't going to end up anywhere. Don't worry about this. So hopefully someone opens this up and says asset. You might, in templates, oftentimes comps are just called, your footage here. Your footage here, and like render this, something like render this comp, things like that.
Render me.
Yeah, space strawberry template. Let's call it A01. Render comp is a good description, so we know we're going to render everything out of here. Oh no, we've got 32 expression errors. That is because we have renamed this comp, and all of our expressions, referring to that comp name.
Right.
So let's.
That's really interesting in terms of workflow, right? Like that it references the actual name. So if you change the name in any way, you have to change something back.
I thought it would, there's been some cases where where it has remembered the name,
right?
Or it's adjusted to that. Maybe, that's more troubleshooting than I could be, bothered with, So probably, the best thing would be to do is to rename it here and then go through and update those expressions. But, for here, be aware that that happens. All right. So let's add another controller here. So let's add, instead of a checkbox, let's add a slider. So if we delete these, we can see expression controls over here. We have a lot of controls. We've got color controls, angle controls, all things here. We want a slider control. So let's double click that. So we have a slider control. And if we toggle down here, we have a slider that goes from 0 to 100. And let's add that to our lines. So if someone wants our lines to go further out or be skinnier, depending on if we've got longer text, let's log our control layer up here first, and let's go to our lines. Now I haven't tested this, so let's see if this works live. Scale. We want. I think what I want to do is maybe I'm trying to decide whether to do this on a null or do it on this layer. Okay.
What would be the difference?
If I were to do it on a null, I could, ignore. If I did it straight on this layer, I would have to just adjust some of these properties and fix this. Not fix this. Like it would cause some errors, and I would just have to adjust this. That would be the right way. The right way to do it.
Okay.
But if I was to do it with a null, I wouldn't have to think about that. It's kind of just like a patch over the top. So maybe I try both ways. So if I was to do that with a null, I'd create a layer, new null object, and parent the lines to that null. They're both going to have the same visual effect in the end. So null here, and I'm going to change the scale. Ooh, should I? I'm not sure how to get the slide here. Okay, scratch that. We're not going to use the null. What we're going to do is content rectangle path. Actually, Okay, ignore that. We're not going to do that with the lines. We're going to move the position with the null of this story template. That's what we want to do, because in our example, we want our animation process and our lines, at the text down here to be a bit lower. So let's go and change that. So let's create a new null layer null object, and I'm going to call that text position. I'm going to parent text main. Let's move our lines to below text main. Both of those to the text position. So now they're parented to this null object. So if I move that null, all of that text moves with it. So let's open up the position property of the null. Let's separate dimensions because we don't want it to move in the x-axis, only the y-axis. So I'm going to alt-click the y position to bring up our expression controller, grab the pick whip, and take that to our slider controller. So now our slider, I click on, is going to control our position of our text. So at the moment it's 0. So if I drag this across, thank you, John Sanders. Thanks for subscribing. So now we can, if we adjust our slider here, we can see it's moving in Y position. Now it doesn't get very far, with this length of 100, because it's going from 0 pixels to 100 pixels down. So we need to make some adjustments. So it's slider. So we can do things like times 10. Oh, he appreciated a project. Thank you, John. Watch the stream. Don't go looking at my projects. so now we've added times 10 here. So what that means is on a slider, instead of going from 100, it's going to max out at 1,000. So maybe we want to go a bit more than 10, maybe times 15. So yeah, that's probably as far as we want it to go down at the bottom. So now, just on this slider, now Andrew's following the work as well. Thank you very much. So now with this slider, we can just move the position around of this text, and it's still got all the animating lines. So we can push it down to the bottom here, but we don't want it to go further than that. We don't want it taking up our swipe up, or if we don't have our swipe up, we don't want it going much more below that because it'll throw off the composition there. And you can, in expression, set sort of limiters, so you can restrict it to not going to 0 here. So actually, I think what we can do is, let's say we want it minimum to be here, which is, let's say 30 pixels. So we can just say, we can put plus 30 pixels at the end here. So even if it's 0, oh no, that didn't work either. Okay, never mind. Okay, I thought that might work. Yeah. So here, now we've got a little bit of a slider that shows, where we can move our text here.
Cool.
So let's shy all of our layers, and I think we have got everything that we need to turn on. Let's turn on our swipe up checkbox. There we go. Text position, we don't need to see that null, so let's shy that. Controller, we do need to see. I might color that something other than green, maybe a nice lavender. There we are, story template. So we go in, got our controller. So let's give it a test. Let's open up our assets, visual footage here. Let's drag in my illustration on our heroes. That's great. Let's move that into the middle. Make sure that is centered. And let's go to, we can also shy this place your footage in this comp here layer, because we don't want people to see or edit that. Oh, also, actually, that's another thing to do, is these layers that we don't want people to edit, we can lock these layers. So I want to find all of those shied layers, and let's go, where is lock? Lock's over here. The same lock you'll get in Photoshop or Illustrator. So now that text position, I can't edit that. That is locked for me. But in my controller, I can still edit that.
Oh,
so that just means if someone unshies this and reveals these layers, they still can't go messing about unless they untick the lock. And if someone's going to unshy something and untick the lock, they've done the hard work. They just, they can change it if they want.
They probably know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're probably a little bit more familiar. So it's quite a good gateway, I think, to kind of separate. You're not going to want to go messing in that if you just want to use the template. but someone else might
Exactly.
think, oh, I want to have a look. And also for you guys, we're actually going to share this file with you as well. So if you want to have a poke around, you can, and check it out.
Absolutely.
And have a look at the nuts and bolts.
Yeah. So here we've got our footage in here. So I want my story template, my text to be down here. I want text main. I want to edit that. Oh, actually. And if we look at this effect order, we've got text top sub, which is pretty much our middle text. So let's drop that below our text top, just so it goes from top to bottom order here. So story template, let's change this to, maybe let's go animation process. Maybe this is linking to the stream we did and the previous week. Extra text, we can change that to hashtag heroes. And 2020 is fine. And let's change those colors. Go to our controller. Primary color, well, secondary color. Let's make this a dark color here. And primary color, maybe this color here. What about a yellow? Will that work? That's going to be too hard to see. Let's go to this very pale gray color here. So within however many seconds that was, we have got a little animation. Let's move that slider up, because now we see it along with the swipe up feature.
Oh, I think it's OES, HEROES.
HER. Oh, here. Oh my god. On heroes. Look at this. Heroes. There we are. Oh, another thing I was going to show is another feature that might be really useful is, well, let's try it with maybe, do we have, what was that other landscape one? Yeah, so we've got another landscape. Now, this is pretty busy to see a lot of this information here. The colors doesn't work too bad. We could maybe drop slightly separate color, but that color works here. So what I'm going to do, let's untry these layers, and I'm going to add above our footage layer, I'm going to create a new adjustment layer, and I'm going to call that blur. Pull that over our asset layer. Let's uncheck this, and add the effect Gaussian blur. And let's blur this up a bit. So we can say a blur will often, help the visibility of text and things like that, depending on whether you need that for your project. But you won't need blur for all of your assets. So let's add a new checker box to turn the blur on and off. Maybe we don't need a checker box. No, we're not going to have a checker box. We're just going to have the slider. So let's go after our controller, add a new slider. Let's actually call this one text position. And let's add a new slider. Call that image blur. So we've got Gaussian blur. So now we do want to see, I want to link this Gaussian blur to this controller, but I want to have both of these visible at the same time. But we don't really need this controller window open to access these. I'm going to lock this controller because everything is hidden underneath here. If we go to Effects and Gaussian blur, we can access the same areas. So I'm going to select Gaussian blur, alt-click the stopwatch, and then drag that blurriness to our image slider. So now on our effects slider, let's toggle down, we can alter the blurriness just from the control layer here. Now, this will only go up to 100, so we can, of course, add ×2 to that, so it can go up to a maximum of 200. So now you can adjust the blurriness here like that. So that's something that I thought would be a little, extra something, and there we are. Let's uncheck that. And we also want repeat edge pixels on our blur visible. That is because we can't see it now because of our border, but if we don't have, let's put the blurriness back up. Actually, that's not, it's because our composition is really small. So we need to extend this the full 16 seconds. So repeat edge pixels. Wait, it's probably not long enough down here as well. There we are. So when we get to the edge here, you notice we get like a shadow, like a little vignette around our blur.
Yeah.
That's because it's blurring into transparency.
Okay.
So if we hide that blur, like, the very edge is going to be, see, we see here, we can see our edge creeping in. So if we're blurring that, it would blur, thank you, Logan. It would blur into, that sort of blackness. Or that would be transparency. If we turn our transparency grid on, we can see that, it's transparent at the back. But if we repeat edge pixels and turn them back on, it's going to continue to repeat that until the very edge. So you can see a bit of a difference there. So let's repeat edge pixels on. That's fine because it's going to be hidden by our border anyway. So we could also shy our blur, lock that blur, hide those layers, and we've got a controller. So we can go in and just adjust our blur, adjust our text position, depending on where we need it. And there we are. We've got our story template.
Fantastic. That's so cool. We've got 20 minutes left, just letting you and chat know as well.
That's perfect.
It's good timing. That's exactly where we thought we would be. 20 minutes. That's great. That's incredible. That's
Excellent.
Super cool. I actually have some After Effects templates sitting around, and about 3 or 4 of the things that you mentioned, I thought, oh, okay, cool. Maybe I'll see if there's a control layer so I can make some of the adjustments that I want to do. So very selfishly, this has been very, very educational for me.
Oh, good. Excellent. So is there anything in the chat, any other things you see in Instagram stories that, we haven't covered here that you'd like us to maybe mention?
Yeah, so is there anything, so do we want some suggestions from the chat of what to animate? Is like the bounce that Festus was talking about, is there some sort of bounce animation that we could throw in?
Let's do a bounce.
Version? We could start with that. If anybody else has something, throw it in chat, let us know, and if we can get to it in the next 20 minutes or so, then we will try. All
right, so the bounce. So I'm going to think about, now I'm thinking about, I was just going to duplicate this to story template 2 and do a bounce there. And but that hasn't broken our expressions, has it? No. Okay. Mm-hmm. So duplicating it is figured out now that that it's a different layer name, a different composition name, because now we're versioned up. That's good to know. Okay. Now let's animate the bounce up here. So let's actually go back to this example here, because that will be a little bit easier. We can see a bit more of the bottom here. Okay, swipe up. So we've got our triangles, so we're going to need to untick those, and our text. So let's go with our first triangle first. So what we can do, we can either hide these layers, or we can also just solo this layer. So now we're just looking at this triangle. So this is very useful if you've got like a lot of effects or a lot of things happening in your composition that might require a lot of rendering time. Like if we had that blur on, that would take more rendering time than it's just rendering, one triangle. Mm. And that's all we're focusing on. So for our bounce in position, we want it to go up. It's going to go from its lowest position up to its highest position, and then go a bit further down, and then a bit further back up, and do like a little spring. So it goes boing, or maybe not a boing. Maybe we don't want it to the boing, but it's going to make that sort of movement. So it's going to go up to its height here. Let's push it a bit further upwards, and then a few keyframes later, it's going to go down, and then up a bit more. So that's now if we go into our graph editor and our triangle 1, I'm going to want to separate those dimensions as well, because we don't need any x-axis keyframes, just the y-axis. So now, maybe let's zoom out a touch. We can see this is a graph representing the value of where on the y-axis our triangle is. Let's move this further up. So, whoops. Let's make our graph editor a bit more visible. So we want this keyframe to be further up. So it's kind of like an inverted look of the path we're looking at. So it starts low, goes high, goes a bit lower, then goes back to normal. We could even add a few more here. So let's copy, paste that keyframe, maybe this one lower, and lower here. So just how many times you want something to bounce. So this hasn't got any easing at all, because it removes the easing when we separate dimensions. So let's add our own. So I'm going to click easy ease down here. I know we want to come in fast, and then probably something like this. I think this is roughly what we want our curve to look like, but we're going to need to look up here. All right, look at that. That's way too bouncy. So let's change that a little bit. We don't want it to bounce up anywhere near as high as that. So let's see how this goes. And that's way too sort of floaty. It looks like it's, being released underwater and then bobbing on the surface. So it needs to come up much faster. So we're going to have a sharper graph at the start. And then we can also select all these this graph, and then like sort of stretch them with a transform box. Now let's see. It's a little bit better. Oh, that's too much. Okay, I think I'm going to get rid of these 2 keyframes. I think it's going to be too bouncy with just, with that extra step here. So let's see how this looks. Whoops. That's looking a little bit better, but it's still too much. Still too much. And I'm going to push these over to the left a bit because I want it to, the movement I'm kind of after now is it to go whoosh, like whoosh, and maybe like a really rigid kind of bounce.
Is that because it's like quite thin, like what the actual element is? Like if it was a big blob, you would think that it could do something like that, and because it's really small, you just kind of want it to be sharp. Like what's your thought process in how this would animate in the real world?
Yeah, definitely you want to think about its form. Like it's something like a blob you might think might move a bit slower and be more bouncy. But yeah, this I do want it to look pretty. I want it to look like sleek and professional. So I don't want it to look cartoony, and a bounce can look really cartoony. And that's one of the things I see often with people that start animating, because bounces, they're great and very expressive, but it tends to make things look sort of really bouncy. And there's a lot of sort of plugins that maybe I want to say aren't great, that have like built-in bounce sort of animations that are great for a bouncing ball, but not great for your company's logo and something like that. So here I think, I just want something that looks just clean and slick, and I think a small amount of bounce is all we need. So this is still even way too much. So let's push this one down. Maybe we don't even need this keyframe. Maybe it just extends up a bit and then comes back down. But that's a little better. So it does have a smooth settle in. So it just overshoots a little bit. Yeah, that's much better. So if we compare that to the one that was earlier that went like boing, it just looks a bit more professional, and we want it to look like it's a smooth swiping motion. So we can maybe. Do
you often think about the sound that it's making as you're animating it? Like, oh, this is more like
it really,
rather than a boing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many meetings, like when we're talking about sound design. Not even when you're talking to sound designers, that's essential that you get visual. Nice. But I think moving things with your hands and really. Especially when communicating with other animators, it needs to whoosh in. It does not. We don't want to. We want to whoosh. You can tell that you can instantly communicate with someone. The speed of something. Just by the noise you make, and it's just another helpful piece of communication toolkit. But you do sound. If you work in an open office with people who aren't animators, it can be they can get weird, especially when I used to film. Because it's good to film reference of yourself for character animations. So I film myself. I remember doing this animation. It was like a hand dropping coins into into a money box thing. I think that was for a bank client. So I had all this. I had set up my iPhone on my desk, and I was filming me just dropping coins onto paper, and people who across the office. There was 60 people in the office who did not know what project I was doing. It was like, what is Ben doing? Has he just gone mad, or is he having good animation practice and snapping can look very similar. All right, so we've got a lovely bounce happening here, and I think that looks pretty good. Festus, I was wrong to doubt you. we can make a swipe look elegant. So let's, I'm going to straight up copy these keyframes and paste them onto our triangle 2. We can unsolo that layer. Now, at the moment, we can't see our triangle 2 layer because it's directly underneath. So I'm going to push that down a bit. So now we have, I'm just going to delay those keyframes by 1 frame or 2. And let's do the same with our swipe up. We can get rid of its keyframes, paste it. It's going to go way further than we need to. So let's drag that down. And let's zoom in and delay that one. So our first triangle is going to bob up first, then our second triangle, then our swipe up. There we are. Let's maybe try to delay them a little bit more and see what that looks like. There's going to be a point where we push this and it's too far, and then we know, and it's always good to try that in case it looks awesome. That doesn't look too bad. I think it looks probably a bit too cartoony though. It's a bit too much of a bouncy movement there. So I know, let's take that back. There, I think that's pretty good. Okay, we've got our nice bouncy swipe up. I can't even see it in that view. There we are. I think that looks good. It looks nice and, floaty and a bit floaty because, it just softly rests on there. So we get a little nice whoosh, like it's just landing. It's very, purposeful and precise, precise movement. Looks like it was intended, to get there. All right. Have we got any other suggestions from chat?
We have a question. We've got about 10 minutes left, chat. So if there is a suggestion of one more maybe animation thing, we can add to this as an option. So Agnes was asking, how do you know or learn how things move so it looks natural? Like now, with this bouncing thing, are there any particular rules? How would you learn that sort of thing?
Oh, I think a lot of experience, a lot of observing, like seeing like animation that you really like. Like I used to, for years, I'd looked at like animations at great studios, and I think, how did they get their easing looks so different than mine? How did they get it working right? But there was really understanding. There's what's called the 12 principles of animation. They're written about extensively in the book. I think it's Imitation of Life, which is kind of the story of the early Disney animators. Like that's a book. If you search animation books, you should get that'll be number 2 next to Animator's Survival Kit. And there's a lot of things in there that talk about anticipation. So we haven't really used that much here. There we are. Before something moves, there will be a little movement before that to sort of give it indication that something is about to, like an action is about to happen. And there's overshoot or follow through, which is what we've done here. So this is like, if you were to start running, I think I've used the example, if you were to sprint and you wanted to stop on the edge of, of the line, at the finish line, because normally sprinters, what they do, they run and then they probably run for an extra 20 meters at least afterwards when they're trying to slow down. It's hard to slow down when you've got this momentum. So there's this momentum that an object has in motion. And to stop that down, you need to, apply some sort of force to it. So in here, we've got arrows having, an imaginary force that's, either the will of the triangle saying, oh, we've gone too far, let's move back, or something like that. Or if you are running, your body says, all right, let's stop running. Well, I suppose you don't really need to, the act of, existing without running is, a negative force that stops the running in a sense. But, there's momentum and you need to cancel that somehow. So either, in our first example, our momentum is, it feels like that's sort of lost before we get to this line here, before we get to its sort of final position. But here, we reach where we are and we've still got a bit of momentum, so we bounce back. And that's just like a little bit of extra detail that makes it seem like more animated in the natural world. There's a bunch of other principles like slow in, slow out, where, same like if you're running a 100-meter race, you're not going to be running at your maximum speed from your first step. You're going to slowly accelerate, and then you're going to decelerate at the end. But after you finish the finish line, so where an animation starts slow, accelerates, and then slows down again. And there's a few other principles like that. So I definitely recommend looking up the 12 principles of animation. And I first sort of dismissed them when I learned about them because, I was doing motion graphics work mainly like this. I was doing less sort of traditional animation. And I thought, these principles, they only apply to Disney animators because most of the examples you'll see are with characters or with objects that, look like traditional frame-by-frame animation. I thought that doesn't apply to motion graphics, but they really do. They're foundational principles, and once I understood and actually, applied them into my work, that was when I saw the biggest leap forward in my skills. And definitely, applying these definitely means getting comfortable in the graph editor, like we were for this animation, finding these curves that we really like and feel nice. You can't, it's very hard to do that just by using some plugins to take care of that, or changing the easing values some other way. Getting into the graph editor, in After Effects is probably the best way to do that. And I'd say maybe a process, or a task you could do is find an example of an animation you really like, and you say, I really like how that square comes in from the right. And steadies itself, and maybe try to recreate that and try to feel, well, what is actually happening. I know Vimeo has a frame-by-frame feature, if you can't download the file, where you can see, all right, well, it starts really fast here, and then it slows down, but then it tilts a bit, and, really observing and breaking down what the motion is. Because ideally, when you watch it, you're not really thinking about that. Maybe you are as an animator, you're really trying to think, what are they doing there? But the purpose is, if it's successful, you just feel it, and it looks great. So I think taking the time to stop and break that down into its pieces and figure out, all right, what exactly is happening. And I think that sort of getting right into the details is kind of what pushes you to the next level. If you're an athlete, you can get better at running by running more. But at a certain point, at a high level, the Olympic athletes are they have high speed cameras of how far back their foots are on the treads, and what tiny things they can do, and you have to look at things that, are more than the obvious surface level of, this eases in, we should have easing to everything, which is kind of how I approached everything. To make things look smooth, you just got to have lots of easing on it. And in reality, there's more things happening than it might seem on the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. Well, we've got a few minutes left, so I thought what we might do, there was one more question, and then maybe we can just have a quick relook at what we've done today, as a template, how you would use it as a template. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds great.
It's a double whammy question. What's your favorite film, and do you ever eat snacks while you animate?
Favorite film? Okay, well, I have two answers to that. Well, I think I have two answers. There's a few. I used to have, I think a couple of years ago, I would have said my favorite film was something pretentious like The Godfather or something. Now I used to, I remember at uni, I was I'll get into film, I'll watch heaps of films so I can pretend to like films to impress people. No one was impressed. It didn't matter at all. Now I think I've come to settle it obviously changes a lot, but I really love, I think Spirited Away is great. I've come to, that's a good one to say, because there's lots of brilliant animation and storytelling in that I resonate with. I also love The Prestige,
It's one of my favorite films.
Love Prestige. There's a bit, it's a little, I'm not gonna say wacky. There is some wackiness in there. It's not it's not, The Godfather or Goodfellas or some hardline thing. But it's got everything I love. It's got it's got thrills. It's got great acting, plot. I love the Prestige. I love it. I also love Jurassic Park is great as well. I'm comfortable putting any of those three up there. Those are awesome. Snacks while I animate. I don't really eat while I'm animating that much, mainly because I need my hands to animate. It's a very two-handed process. I don't tend to eat too much at my desk. I'll have an apple occasionally. That's the type of thing. If normally I do my eating and snacking. That requires my full attention because
Right.
I like to snack. I like to snack very seriously. So I don't want to. I feel like I'm wasting snacks. I'm wasting calories if I'm not concentrating on it. If I'm trying to do something else, and then my keyboard gets all messy. I washed my keyboard the other week. I got a mechanical keyboard. I had to clack out all the individual keys. Took about an hour to
I
clean
need
them
to
all.
do that. That's on my list.
Yeah, once you pop them all out, you're like, what went on in here? It's a war zone down in the
It's
keyboard.
amazing what they
And that's
collect.
without snacking.
Okay, cool. Well, we've got a few minutes left, maybe 3 minutes to kind of safely, so we don't get cut off, just kind of have a quick look at what we've done today. And just a reminder that we'll make this file available to you at some point. It'll be over at the Asia Pacific YouTube channel. We'll just leave it in the comments once we get it out. We'll put it on Dropbox for a while, so you can grab the file, have a poke around. You can use it yourself. Obviously that's the point.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, everything in here, the type is, and Adobe type gets stuff, replace it with your own type, make it suit your aesthetic. This one's very much a clean, sort of slick sort of template, but if you're a bit, if you're a bit grubbier, a bit textured like me, you put some texture on the borders, make the typeface something a bit more fun, maybe you get rid of the lines, you don't need those, that type of stuff. So what we did today is first we, broke down the design of our animation, what we're going to do, cover that, how my process of doing that in Illustrator, and then we sort of built it piece by piece in After Effects. Essentially, the first point, we just built all of our assets without animating. We could have imported some of those from After Effects, but I wanted to show that you can create all of these things in After Effects. We have all the tools there if we need to, and that just makes them more editable. So we can edit our stroke width and things like that we did for our border. And then what do we do? So we animated first. So I know it's very much, saving your dessert for last, like eating your vegetables. So we spent, probably 10, 15 minutes just creating all the text layers and the rectangles. And then you get to finally animate. But once you're animating, like I like to snack with intent, but you're animating with intent. You're not worrying about design or making more assets. You've got all of your things. Like when you see chefs, they on TV shows, they've got everything all in those little glass bowls before they start cooking. That's probably not practically how any of us can cook, but with everything out in front of you, it's a lot easier to focus on, getting it right. So then we animated all our assets, just sliding in, animated some stroke width as well, and then we focused on templatizing it, breaking down what things are we going to need to change and how can we make that simple by shying a lot of layers, locking them, and then creating a controller layer where we can edit all of those and link them up with expressions.
Awesome, fantastic. This has been amazing, and thank you everybody in chat. There's been some wonderful questions today, which is always great to get. And I'm just going to quickly bring up the schedule. I think we have a few seconds to bring the schedule up so we can show you what else is coming on Adobe Live this week. So here we are at the moment. Instagram story templates with Ben Marriott. 8:30 here in Sydney. And then tomorrow we have On a Hero's illustration with Bianca Beers, so that's going to be amazing, lots of fun. We have Demis Rusley back for some creative photography editing. We got some speed painting happening on Saturday, nice and early at 8 o'clock, which is always a favorite in our house at the moment, waking up at 8 o'clock, do some live streams. It is a good time. But yeah, thank you very much, Ben Marriott. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Flynn. Always happy to be here.
Cool. And see you, chat, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.